Leon joins us, crypto research analyst at Bitwise. Juan, good morning to you. If we could just begin with, well, first, happy Friday. Thanks for sharing part of yours with us on the Schwab Network. It's not just stocks at these all-time highs. I mean, this chart clearly states, not necessarily right where the bulls would like it to be, but hanging in there and establishing value at historic levels.
Good morning, Ben. It's great to be with you this morning. As you mentioned, there has been some short-term price volatility with Bitcoin, but year to date, it's still up 40%. It's still one of the best performing assets in the market this year. And on the longer term chart you showed, it's clear that it's still in a bull trend going upwards. Whether there's some concerns in the current market about miners selling Bitcoin to cover higher costs, about governments that have seized Bitcoin selling some of that and that putting pressure on the price. But if you zoom out, supply issuance has been cut in half this year, and more institutions are set to allocate over the coming year. So the demand supply setup is very bullish going forward.
Let's do that. Let's zoom out a little bit here as well, because I was just talking about the rally we'd seen since this time last year. As you do look at that longer term, again, we're going all the way back to 2017, 2018 here, 3,000 all the way up to, again, 74,000. You mentioned the halving event. I feel like, though, it was kind of somewhat lackluster, right? It didn't really provide that follow-through that the bulls were looking for.
Well, it's still very short term since April when the halving happened. Usually we see that play out over the full year after the halving. And so I think it's still it's still too short term to call that. I think still we're going higher given the continued inflows that we're seeing. We've seen 14 billion in inflows into the ETFs this year, making it the best launch in ETF history. And there's more institutions coming. So I think that setup is conducive over the next 12 months. Also, many investors we speak to at Bitwise are worried about global debt and how that's stifling growth. We're currently sitting at a global debt to GDP ratio of 330%, which is astounding, just to eye-popping number. And so investors are looking for alternative stores of value like Bitcoin that don't face the devaluation of fiat currencies.
A couple good points there. And to your earlier point, still up 40% on the year, I think it is. More institutions are coming, right? And I like that kind of in terms of providing support, the bullish narrative. And I feel like, as you said that kind of reminded me, that's what Bernstein cited. I think it was last week. They were calling for 150, 200,000 for Bitcoin by the end of the year.
Yeah, they're very bullish. We're bullish as well. There's the Morgan Stanleys of the world, the UBSs, the Wells Fargos, all the wirehouses. They're in talks with the issuers of Bitcoin ETFs, such as ourselves, about doing their due diligence process to allocate. It's hard to know when they'll make their decision, but we think over the next 12 months, many of these wirehouses that haven't approved the Bitcoin ETFs yet will do so, and that will bring a new wave of capital into the market that is bigger. We expect to be bigger than the inflows that we've seen so far.
I like that. I was just kind of thinking one of the other things I feel like are events that didn't really provide that catalyst that some of the bulls were looking for into the spring was the Ether, the SEC approval of an Ether ETF kind of sort of flew below the radar, but it really hasn't really provided that next big catalyst, I guess is the way of thinking of it. But again, kind of along these lines, where do you find some of the best opportunities to position yourself if we do see some of that more institutional integration?
Yeah, that's a great question, Ben. And as you mentioned, ETH has sort of flown under the radar for investors this year. But if you look at its performance, it's actually up 45% year to date. So it's actually beating Bitcoin. And the spot ETFs haven't even launched yet for Ether. So we saw Bitcoin hit new all-time highs post the ETF launch in January. So we're very excited for the prospect of ETH as the ETFs are expected to hit the market. Us and other issuers are in the last innings with the SEC in terms of comments back and forth to gear up these ETFs to launch. We're expecting them to launch sometime this summer. And so we think that's going to bring a lot of excitement into the market for ETH. The investors we speak to are very excited about a high growth technology play like Ethereum, given the innovation happening on its platform with smart contracts and the disruption that's creating in decentralized finance and other industries. And so we think there'll be plenty of demand for these ETFs as they come to market over the next 12 months, 18 months.
Juan, getting back to price, I feel like stock index futures products in a bit of a holding pattern, holding up near these all-time highs, a very similar pattern in many ways in terms of what we just looked at as far as Bitcoin, a bullish pattern at that, right? The acceptance of no rejection of this upper level, especially when you look at that longer-term trajectory that we've been in, just the fact that we're poised for that next move to the upside. I feel like maybe that'll come in terms of stocks from some clarity from the Fed as far as rates, some real definition in terms of the trajectory there. Do you think that could be beneficial for Bitcoin as well, right? Once we get some sort of answers, there seems to be more questions than not as of recent.
Yeah, absolutely. The Bitcoin market has its own drivers, but you can't deny the macroeconomic factors. Once we get more clarity as to monetary policy from the Fed, I think that could be a catalyst. We saw Bitcoin hit 74,000 all-time highs earlier this year, and since then it's been in sort of an holding pattern between 60 and 70. Hasn't broken below, as you mentioned. It's found support, and so I think it's just sort of coiling as a springboard for the next catalyst to drive it higher.
It sounds like, though, the broader, more widespread adoption is what you're really looking for, too, in terms of providing that next lift.
Yes, absolutely. It's going to be what drives it. Given the lower supply, we're seeing the drivers of higher demand with more institutions. We're seeing more corporations start to adopt Bitcoin as an asset on their treasury balances. And I think that all of those are signs of growing institutional adoption that is very bullish for Bitcoin.
You know, Juan, I'm reminded of the first day that we were able to trade the ETF here in the office. There were a couple guys that added some to their retirement account, small portion, but again, just sort of establishing that access point, I feel like. So, again, more widespread adoption in theory in terms of some of the other avenues could help that effort. So we look forward to watching this process continue here. And again, just sort of speaking to where we are at these levels, not necessarily, the bulls always want to see this thing charging higher, I feel like, but acceptance and value and a sideways consolidation is a win in many ways also, especially when you're just off all-time highs. Juan, appreciate you joining us, sharing part of your thoughts, or part of your Friday with us this morning. Juan Leon from Bitwise.